In the early morning hours of July 8th, 2022, Jimmie Jay Lee would be seen for the very last time leaving his student housing, leaving behind his beloved dog, dressed in a bathrobe, a gold bonnet, his favorite color, and house shoes. It would be the last time, as I mentioned, that he would be seen. I want to talk about the case of Jimmie Jay Lee, Ole Miss student who is now officially deemed dead, and a man who is a young kid, rather, who's on trial for his murder. A case that I was close to and covered slightly during my time working in Memphis, Tennessee, which is about an hour or so drive up the road from Oxford. A very, 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 very interesting case. Today, we're going to be in Mississippi, as I mentioned, Oxford, Mississippi, where the private life of two young Black men, one of them a confident, open, and appearing to be fun loving person, and the other from a prominent local church family who appear to be living some type of secret life, or at the very least, have a lot of secrets. University of Mississippi graduate Jimmie Jay Lee spoke with his mother, Stephanie, every day, according to court testimony, often more than once. And it was really the lack of communication with her son that got authorities involved pretty fairly on in this case, something you don't see happen a lot of times, right? Someone's missing, they're missing, they're missing, they're missing, and the family notices it, but officers or police don't take it seriously, or they don't give it as much attention usually until it's further out. It appears here authorities got involved fairly quickly, or at least quickly or more quickly than is normal. And as I mentioned, I covered a bit of this case during my time reporting in Memphis, Tennessee, and I want to talk about it as it is set to go to trial potentially here again after a key thing broke after a mistrial. I want that to be understood. There was a trial already, ended in a mistrial, and then something key happened, which if you're watching this video, you probably already know what that is. I'm gonna tease it for those who may not be familiar with the case, and then I will get more into it later. A key piece of evidence was discovered after that mistrial of Timothy Herrington, who is on trial for the murder of Jimmie Jay Lee. Let's get into this story. As I mentioned, he talked to his mother every single day, constantly talked to his mother. According to testimony, they talked in the morning while Jimmie Lee prepared to leave for his internship. He had an internship working for credit for his master's degree program. Jay had completed his undergrad pretty early, and he did so with honors. Jimmie Jay Lee was known to be extroverted. The word a lot of people use to talk or describe him is vibrant. July 8th, again, was the day he went missing, or the last time people had contact with him. It was his mother's birthday, of all things. Every year, Jay called and sang happy birthday over the phone following his first celebratory message to his mother that day at 2 a.m. She messaged back around 7 that morning, but received no response. She lived, now this is key, she lived in Jackson, Mississippi. Stephanie, his mother, messaged and called, and as the family continued their plans throughout the day, she sporadically placed calls out to Jay in Oxford, Mississippi, then to Oxford PD. As a mother, hearing her testify in the pretrial hearings on this particular case, she essentially characterized it as she knew something was wrong because it was not like her son not to talk to her. It was not like her to not hear from her son. She reached out to Oxford PD, pleading with them, asking them, hey, go do a welfare check. She reached out to Jay's friends, who also messaged and began to search for him from outside and around the campus walk apartments. That's where he stayed. Campus walk apartments. Keep that in mind. According to testimony, friends could hear Jay's dog, that Pomeranian that I mentioned he left behind, barking but there was no answer at the door. University police pulled video surveillance footage from Campus Walk. It showed Jay Lee leaving his apartment a little after 4 a.m., coming back about 40 minutes later, then leaving again that same morning around 5:58 a.m., again in a bathrobe, a bonnet, and in his favorite gold-colored bonnet. It didn't appear that he had intended to be gone for very long. Cell phone locations pinged from AT&T and showed Jay's phone at different locations after midnight until about 7:28 a.m. On July 8th, the last two locations were near Stone Park and Residential College South, not too far from Campus Walk Apartments. Pleas were made by law enforcement as well as Jimmie Jay Lee's family for any information that could help find out what happened to their son.
Want everyone to know that whether you're black, white, green, polka dot, it doesn't matter who you are. He was there to help if you saw the need. I'm asking that if anyone knows anything or sees anything, say something. Call, contact the law enforcement. Just tell them what you know. This is my plea that you help find my child.
Following surveillance video and the university police press release, investigators received a call from a local towing company called Bandit Towing. The company serviced Molly Bar Trails, as an apartment complex for the University of Mississippi students. That's key. They made tows for Molly Bar Trails, this apartment complex for University of Mississippi students. That's Molly Bar Trails apartments. Keep in mind, he lives at the Campus Walk apartments, but they towed his car from the Molly Bar Trails apartments. On the afternoon of July 8th, the company had towed a black Ford Fusion that had been left in that lot and was not owned by any of the residents there at the Molly Bar Trails apartments. The car had distinctive features, so it was unmistakable who car it was. It had a gold stripe down the center of the hood, and I love my Pomeranian bumper sticker, and the license plate read Jay Lee. You knew who owned this car. Photographs taken by the towing company showed the car parked over the curb with its front tires pulled far to the left. Investigators believe that was indicative and showed that the car was parked there kind of quickly. It was a rush job. Inside the vehicle, they located a key ring as well as Jay's credit and debit cards in some type of wallet holder, additional keys and other personal items, with the exceptions of his phone. They located keys, they located credit cards, debit cards, but they did not find his phone. The car could be traced to the Molly Bar complex via security camera footage. It was captured traveling in that direction on the morning of July 8th, just before 7:30. At no point is the driver in the car visibly clearly seen. And that's key there. You can't see who's driving the car, but you do know his car is in this area driving around Molly Bar Apartments around 7:30, but you can't tell if it's him driving, Jimmie Jay Lee, or someone else driving. And that's a key piece of the key thread here. All right. Only Jimmie Jay Lee's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. The towing company were not the only ones looking and searching for Jimmie Jay Lee. They weren't the only ones looking. A good friend of Jay's, 27-year-old X-ray tech, Khalid Fears, offered a key piece of information to investigators. On a break from his night shift at a local hospital, Khalid says he was FaceTiming with Jay Lee as he exited his apartment that morning. So Khalid is a friend. He's an older friend. He comes up, you'll see from him his words himself, but he comes up later on in testimony in the court. And he says, I was FaceTiming with him as he was leaving the apartment complex, right? Just before 6 that morning. That was the last person to know or to have spoken, or the last known person to have spoken to him. Jay told his friend that he was on his way to meet up with a romantic interest. Without revealing the name of the man he was meeting, he explained that the two had been intimate earlier that night, but things happened and got into some type of argument. In fact, Jay told Khalid that he had returned home and immediately blocked this guy, across all social media accounts. So something happened where he's like, I'm blocking you. This hookup, this link wasn't what I thought it was. And so just outright blocked him, right? Only hours later, they had somehow reconnected and he was willing to give it another chance, right? I think we all know how that goes. This mystery man had promised to do with him, or rather to him, something that he had never done before. All right. And we're going to get into the breakdown of the text messages. Obviously, it appears to be sexual. Through their video connection, Khalid says he saw the open sky in the background and heard the sound of Jimmie Jay Lee's Ford Fusion starting up as the call ended for the second time that night. Jay was on his way to the home of this mystery guy who we don't know yet. Khalid messaged a few hours later, "Hey, friend, hoping to see how it went." He received no response. Investigators did not have his phone, but they got all this information because they saw his iCloud backup accounts and they saw this information. They found messages between 5:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. that sounded as if Jimmie Jay Lee was going to see someone just as Khalid had told them. The exchange was with a username, Red Eye 24. I want to read this exchange so y'all can see it verbatim. If my memory serves me correct from sitting in the courtroom, these are Snapchat. These are Snapchat messages. Okay. And so 5:17 a.m., the message reads, "Who the F is this?" Red Eye replied, "Come back," followed by, "You coming or not?" "No." At 5:27, "Why not, you fool? Like you did some questionable stuff, but there was too much. Have a good night, Tim." At 5:37, Jay wrote, "Yeah, now it seemed like you just trying to lure me over there to beat my ass or something." Red Eye replied, "You tripping. I do feel bad because we cool, so I ain't trying to end it like this." Jimmie Jay Lee responds, "How we cool and you barely want me to text you?" Red Eye appears to try to calm him, reassure him like everything's going to be okay. He says, "I'm saying you're a cool person." At that point, Jay suggested that he would return, but on one condition. He wanted a physical act from Red Eye for some reason. He wanted a physical act of like, "Hey, I did this for you, you do this for me." At 5:45, Red Eye agreed. Jimmie Jay Lee left his apartment before 6 a.m. At 6:03, he sent one final message. Open, which prosecutors assume he had arrived at Red Eye's home, and no one's seen or heard from him since then. So these text messages seem to corroborate Khalid's, last accounting of him talking to his friend. The Red Eye account was traced back to an email associated with the Dirt for Diamonds podcast. The host was University of Mississippi student Timothy Herrington, 22-year-old Timothy Herrington.
Well, thank y'all for listening. And this is another episode of Dirt for Diamonds podcast. And I hope.
All right, let's get into a little bit of background about Timothy Herrington Jr., this 22-year-old guy. He's probably about 24, 25 at this point, at the time of this recording, because this happened back in 2022. Timothy Herrington Jr. came from a very distinguished, very put together appearing middle class and respected family in Grenada, Mississippi. His grandfather was a pastor of a local church and had been for over 4 decades. Since he graduated, Timothy Herrington worked with a friend to operate a moving business. He also assisted his grandfather with the upkeep of various rental properties owned by his family. Once connected to the Snapchat account, investigators were able to link Tim's other correspondence with Jay Lee. They found that the conversation between the two had originated earlier in that night and from a different account. Remember that he told Khalid, the friend, that, "Hey, I met this guy. We got some type of argument. I blocked him on everything." And the guy reaches out to this Red Eye 24 account and they reconnect and it appears that he goes back over. All right. These messages further suggested that the two were in a sexual relationship. They also indicated that Timothy was hiding his sexuality, at least publicly. To Tim's original account, Jay wrote, "I just wanted to be able to say I had you. Be the down low again. Fun to have been the first guy experiment over. Also, I blanked on your floor, so you should get that up. By the way, oh, and the nude was fake too. Back to block now." After this, Tim attempted to call Jay 3 times. He didn't answer. Jay Lee had blocked Timothy across all of his accounts, as he mentioned, as Khalid, the friend, mentioned in their exchange. It was after Jay took this step that Tim used this alternative Red Eye 24 account, reached out again, and convinced him to return to his apartment at Lafayette Place. It was less than a half a mile away from Campus Walk Apartments, where Jimmie Jay Lee lived. On the morning of July 8th, after meeting with Jay Lee at his home, Timothy Herrington searched for the location of a Walmart on his Google Map app. Yeah, this is key. Then drove to one. So after he met with Jimmie Jay Lee, he looks up at Walmart. He goes to the Walmart. He was captured on camera examining large garbage bins. He eventually purchased a roll of duct tape and returned to Lafayette Place, his apartments. Later on, he was captured driving his white Ford Escape past various locations in Grenada, including RS Cleaners, Wade Incorporated, and Emmanuel Baptist Church. After the Walmart trip, he switched vehicles, having picked up the box truck used for his moving company. He switches vehicles to get out of his white car and picks up the box truck used for his moving company. His phone data corroborated these movements. By mid-morning, he arrived at his parents' home in Grenada, where video footage showed him wiping his shoes before retrieving a shovel and a wheelbarrow from the house. In earlier footage, he was seen wearing white and black tennis shoes, but later he switched to rubber boots. By the evening, Tim returned to his parents' home, unloaded the wheelbarrow from the truck, and left again. Investigators first spoke with Tim at his home, inquiring about the nature of his relationship with Jimmie Jay Lee. And he described it as just, we're friends, we're an acquaintance, but denied having a close relationship or any recent contact. That was when they met with him at his apartment. He also offered a rundown of his movements for July 8th, noting that he picked up the box truck later that day in preparation for a move. His business partner kind of contradicted that and said, hey, he told police no moves had been scheduled for that day. During his initial interview, Tim also omitted critical details, namely that he had been in the vicinity of the Molly Bar apartment complex that morning. So in an initial interview at the apartment, he did not tell them he had been in the vicinity of the Molly Bar apartments that morning. Footage obtained from the entrance of the complex showed Jay Lee's car. Again, remember, couldn't tell who was driving the car, but it showed around 7:25 his car, Jimmie Jay Lee's car, entering this apartment complex at the Molly Bar Trail Apartments. The car had been tracked driving from the area of Lafayette Place, where Timothy Herrington lives. But it wasn't tracked leaving directly from the building, but it's tracked leaving from that vicinity. 9 minutes after the car pulled into the Molly Bar apartments, roughly around 7:34 a.m., a figure in black shorts and a gray hoodie was captured jogging from the parking lot. Investigators believe this individual was Timothy Herrington. During a second interview held at the police station, Tim kind of changed his story and changed the timeline of everything. He admitted to having a sexual relationship with Jay Lee. He changed his story. He admitted to having a sexual relationship with Jimmie Jay Lee and that they had been together on the night of July 8th. He also said that he had been for a jog near the Molly Bar apartment complex, where Jay's car was left around 7:30 that morning. Now, he jogged from that area, the Molly Bar apartments, and he came across a friend at Rocket's gas station. Keziah Carter offered Tim, who was dressed in his black shorts and gray hoodie, a ride back to his apartment, Lafayette Place. Keziah recounted to authorities that Tim had been sweating and was slightly out of breath, but he wasn't sweating enough, like you would in 86-degree Mississippi weather. We know how Mississippi weather is. Trust me, it ain't Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, all that type of weather down there, living down there. It ain't nothing pleasant. At the police station, Tim was interviewed and he was asked by detectives what he thought had happened to Jimmie Jay Lee. He suggested that the 20-year-old grad student had met someone for casual sex and probably been kidnapped. He suggested that. He brought it up after being asked, hey, what do you think happened to him? Timothy Herrington was arrested and charged with murder, and he was released on a $250,000 bond waiting for trial. The state theorized that Timothy Herrington was desperate to keep his relationship with Jimmie Jay Lee a secret, and that he feared that Jimmie Jay Lee would, quote unquote, expose him, and therefore he strangled him, lured him back to his apartment complex, and strangled him. In fact, Google search history from Tim's devices appeared to support this claim. Only moments after Jimmie Jay Lee agreed to come back that second time and return to Lafayette Place Apartments, Tim searched, how long does it take to strangle someone? Hinds County Assistant District Attorney Gwen Ego was appointed as a special prosecutor to try this case. The Lafayette District Attorney had declined to seek the death penalty, though Tim did face, at that initial trial, a life sentence if convicted. His defense team had successfully argued that a fair trial could not be secured inside the county limits of Lafayette. Jurors were selected in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, about 250 miles south of Oxford, Mississippi, and transported by bus to Lafayette County. They were sequestered for the proceedings. Now, here's the biggest gap in the prosecution's case. There was a lack of physical evidence at the time. Not only had they not located Jimmie Jay Lee's body, but they had failed to define an actual crime scene. Searches for Jimmie Jay Lee's fusion of Tim's escape and of the box fan, or the box truck, I should say, were not performed until over 2 weeks after Jimmie Jay Lee went missing. The same was also true for the search warrant obtained for Timothy Herrington's apartment at Lafayette Place. DNA and fiber evidence was lacking. Over 70 search warrants had been provided to the state case, but very little was found. Cadaver dogs did hit inside the apartment, and investigators found Walmart bags with latex gloves inside. They found a single acrylic fingernail. They found a gray hoodie at Tim's parents' house in Grenada, Mississippi. They found a pair of black shorts and a white t-shirt like those worn in that surveillance video, but it was not a smoking gun.
DNA evidence, blood, urine, trace evidence whatsoever. They don't have one scintilla that means anything in legal terms. First of all, that a death occurred in Lafayette County if it did occur. Second of all, any trace evidence in his apartment, zero. I'm not saying speculatively, it is their proof that a crime was ever committed inside our client's apartment, or in the parking lot, or in his car, or in Jaden's car. Nowhere.
Defense attorney Kevin Horan put Jay's personal life really at the focus of the trial, claiming that he was not passing judgment. The attorney proceeded to imply that Jimmie Jay Lee's romantic endeavors provided an opening for reasonable doubt of his client's guilt. The key to the defense here is they not denying, or in essence denying, that he may be dead at this point in time because there wasn't a body. But they're simply saying, hey, looking at it from the standpoint of how it involves my client, you can't say it to my client because there's not enough physical evidence tying my client, if he is dead, to him. And given his quote unquote behavior when it comes to his romantic escapades, you can't say if he is dead that my client is the one that did it. Essentially is the defense's argument. The defense's argument was not well received by those close to Jimmie Jay Lee. Look at this exchange between Timothy Herrington's defense attorney and friends of Jimmie Jay Lee's testifying at the first trial.
Flamboyantly, as basically as a woman, correct? A lot of times.
He dressed as Jay Lee.
Okay, it's Jay Lee. But I understand, but if someone, he just dressed up, if you just looked at him, he appeared to be dressed up as a woman on a lot of occasions, or at least in a feminine manner. Is that a fair statement?
He dressed very fashionably.
Okay, all right. So would that also be a fair statement that he, quote unquote, liked to hook up with people that were on the down low?
Excuse me?
Is it a fair statement based on what you know about Jay Lee that he liked to hook up with individuals that were, what you testified earlier, were on the down low? That he liked to do that? Is that right?
What's the relevancy to this question, sir? Can you rephrase it? I'm sorry.
Well, that whether or not Jay Lee liked to hook up with individuals, I'm not saying whether it's men or women or what, but individuals that were on the down low. He liked to do that, correct?
No.
Was Jay Lee down low?
No, ma'am. As fashionably as he dressed, no, ma'am.
So it was obvious that he was gay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, remember Khalid, he also took the stand. He described his relationship again as like a mentor type friend to Jimmie Jay Lee.
Yeah, I would tell him that like a down low man or like a man who isn't comfortable with their sexuality is not someone you want to be out here hooking up with. I was like, because, you know,
What did you tell him?
I told him, I said they will kill you before their dirty little secret gets exposed.
Khalid saw the pleas from law enforcement, saw them asking if you know anything, please reach out, and he reached out. But unlike Khalid, Timothy Herrington didn't reach out. And this is the key of the prosecution's case. He did not reach out. In fact, the night before the disappearance was publicly announced, before any of the public knew about how or why or who was who disappeared, this is what Timothy Herrington was reportedly searching. All right. He searched for Jay's Twitter account in the days following, as local news was flooded with requests for information. And as I know in the news industry, we get these stories and we know very little detail, and they always, sadly, most of the time, 90% of the time, end tragic. It never ends in a happy way. And we get information, authorities give us information, and once they put it out, we report it. Authorities say XYZ is missing. If you see them, please contact this number, this email. Please reach out to these authorities with any information that you may have. We get those, we put them out as much as we can. And then we begin, as reporters, trying to contact family. Maybe family will speak to us. Sometimes they won't, sometimes they will. And we try our best to assist in those investigations in the sense of just giving information out. Information was given out. Timothy Herrington, unlike Khalid, Timothy Herrington did not respond and give what he knew. He had to be approached first by authorities. So authorities are seeing this as a guilty person or a person that knows something or involved in some way, because when they put out the information to the media and the media shares it, Khalid and others who knew him, had contact with them, came forward with what they knew and shared really their final moments with him. Timothy Herrington didn't do that, or at least an attempt to do that, according to the prosecution. He also went in the days following, he also began making numerous searches for Molly Bar apartments on July 10th. So 2 days after Jimmie Jay Lee is missing. In an effort to display how thorough the investigation Assistant District Attorney asked the detectives and all involved to talk about exactly who was a person of interest and who did detectives consider to be people of interest.
Early on in the case, Jose Reyes was a person of interest, basically just because the family at the time didn't know a whole lot about Jose, but thought that he might have been Jay Lee's boyfriend at the time. So we run down every avenue that we can. So we talked to him and end up clearing him and figured out that no, they're just really good friends.
Tell me about another suspect or person of interest that you all looked into.
LeBroderick Peterson.
And why was he a person of interest?
So LeBroderick was a person of interest because he was one of the people that had texted Jay Lee earlier in that morning or late in that night of the 7th, 8th. He was one of the recent contacts in Jay Lee's phone records. We talked to Khalid Fears. Of course, he was one of the first ones, or one of the last ones to talk to him. In a murder investigation or in a missing persons investigation, you got to clear everybody. You got to kind of go look through anybody that you can. Kent Ware.
What about Rashad Hayes?
We also looked into Timberland Mathis. Looked into Devon Franklin. Blaine Brown was one of the last people that there was digital communication between him and Lee.
And were any of these people confirmed to be in the area of Lafayette Place Apartments at this time?
No, they were not.
Do any of these people live at Lafayette Place Apartments?
No.
And the conversation that you all were looking into, the one between Red Eye and Jay Lee, were any of these people behind that account?
No, they were not.
Who was behind that account?
Timothy Herrington.
Many of these people of interest were eliminated from consideration based in part on their cell phone location data. Location data, however, also showed Tim, or at least his phone, at his apartment, not driving Jimmie Jay Lee's car. And that's the crux of what this case hinges on. Who was driving the car? Can you prove it was Timothy Herrington driving the car? It appears that he was in the vicinity of the apartment complex where the car was later found by authorities and towed by that towing company. Prosecutor Ben Creekmore argued that Timothy Herrington killed Jay Lee and then hid his body as a way to conceal and protect his down low sexual identity. After hours of deliberation, the jury could not come to a unanimous decision. It was 11-1 in favor of a guilty verdict.
Further deliberations resolve this. Jury, that other jurors have that same opinion?
Yes.
All right. I thank you for your effort. I'm going to declare a mistrial.
And that one holdout who could not decide that led to the mistrial, that one holdout said that it was because of evidentiary reasons that they did not feel comfortable voting guilty. There was no body, and there was questions about some of the evidence. To that juror, some of the evidence didn't add up. One of the main reasons was because there was no body. But less than 2 months after this mistrial, on February 3rd, deer hunters in Carroll County, off of County Road 65, at an illegal dumping site, found human remains. 2 days later, they were confirmed to be those of Jimmie Jay Lee. Carroll County is an hour and a half southwest of Oxford, Mississippi. Right now, no cause of death has been declared for the remains of Jimmie Jay Lee. They have re-indicted and now charged Timothy Herrington with tampering with evidence, along with another capital murder charge.
Timothy Herrington Jr., staring forward, not speaking, headed back to Lafayette County Jail after being arraigned on a new charge of tampering with physical evidence, on top of a capital murder charge in the death of Jimmie Jay Lee. Herrington pleaded not guilty and was denied bond. Lee's parents encouraged by the latest developments in Lafayette County Circuit Court.
Justice is getting close to being served. It's an ongoing process. We know it doesn't happen overnight.
Coming back in a bit of my perspective, covering this case was really something, right? I was this close to Timothy Herrington. Like, he walked by me, I was this close to him. And one of the big things you get, and one of the things that all of the reporters were saying, was that the evidence suggests one thing, but his aura does not give that. And I think one of the big takeaways, if there are takeaways from these tragedies, is in our darkest moments, you never know what a human being is potentially capable of. You just don't know. The prosecution has their theory. The defense has their theory. And I think, given the evidence I presented to y'all, y'all will have y'all theory. But when it's all said and done, I think the biggest takeaway is no human being, if he is guilty, if he is found guilty, and he has not been found guilty, it was a mistrial, and he's been re-indicted, but he has not been found guilty yet. In our country, you're innocent until proven guilty. But it makes you think. It makes you consider, it makes you wonder. When it comes to the background that Timothy Herrington has. College graduate, entrepreneur, comes from a church background. I'm familiar. I grew up in church myself. Middle-class Black family in the South. Some would argue those implications in that context is even more reason. But some would also say, how could someone from that background with that much opportunity in the South do something like this? And I think the only people that know what happened is Timothy Herrington. Sadly, it's now confirmed, a deceased Jimmie Jay Lee. And given a body has now been found, and that one holdout that led to the mistrial on that jury, that was one of the main reasons that they were a holdout. Given that that body is now found, the question now becomes, and I think it's a fair question, how can he have a fair trial? And that's why I'm always conflicted, even covering these things. And I want to give you a little bit of perspective as a reporter. Even covering these things, you always have in the back of your mind people who need to know. In many cases, people have a right to know. But how can I and how would I influence the process of justice? We don't want to. We just want a true reporter, honest reporter, does not want to influence the process of justice in either way, a guilty or not guilty verdict. But we run a fine line. I don't know what y'all think about this case. Part of what I want to do and what I'm doing on this podcast is looking at true crime as some of the most, that's some of the most high interest content. So part of what I'm doing, I will interview people, do long form interviews with people, talk to people, but also look at true crime cases, some that I cover because I do it in the course of my day job, but also others out there I find interesting because I think I have a bit of a different perspective being a journalist. a TV journalist. So I want to know your thoughts on this case. What do y'all think will happen next now the body has been found? What do y'all think could potentially happen? Initially, they weren't seeking the death penalty. They just wanted life in prison. Now that the body is found, that may change. These additional charges may factor into that somehow. What are your thoughts? I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Find the podcast anywhere you get your podcast on all major podcasting platforms. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see y'all next time.